Hey guys, in this video, we're going to be talking about 10 tips that can help you improve in Valorant, specifically from Reddit. Now, not every tip that's put out there on Reddit is necessarily a good tip when it comes to Valorant, but there was this huge thread of one guy asking, what is one Valorant tip that made you better? And throughout this entire thread, there were tons of great comments, and I thought, why not take the best comments from this thread and share them with you guys. Just a reminder that I stream every single day on Twitch at the 1ZK. The link is down in the description. Make sure you go drop me a follow. But with that being said, let's get right into these tips. Tip number 1 comes from the user Still a Closet and says, not crouching, but counter strafing in most gunfights that are medium to long range. And I could not agree more with this comment. I'm a victim of this. I think everybody is. Everybody gets caught crouch spraying in scenarios where they probably shouldn't be. Think about it like this. When you're counter strafing, you're always moving back and forth. Whereas when you're crouch spraying, you're standing completely still in one spot and you can't move out of that. What's harder to hit in that scenario? The person that's constantly moving back and forth or the person that's standing completely still? We know the answer here. Tip number 2 comes from Hefist Z, and it says, always have a good mental and don't play comp when you aren't feeling your best. Whenever you're queuing comp, always make sure you have a positive mindset. And when you start autopiling in games and not thinking about what you're doing, you should take a break. And I couldn't agree with this more. I think so many of us get into this tilt queue where we lose 1 or 2 and we think, hey, let's just play 1 or 2 more and try to get that elo back. And then we lose, and then we lose, and then we lose, and we lose some more. It's like, enough is enough. After a couple games, if you're not feeling well, take a break, come back tomorrow, maybe just play some DMs and click some heads. Tip number 3 comes from user Gabe Thy Godly, and it says, when peeking a wide angle, such as peeking into Ascent A from heaven when retaking, don't just peek straight into the whole site. And this is a great tip because so many people wide swing angles that expose them to so many different areas. What you want to do instead is peek each possible angle that you can be peeked from one by one. So if you're peeking from heaven, first, you want to clear the headshot angle. Second, you want to clear the double boxes. Third, you want to clear gen, and then you can drop and isolate hell. The whole point is to isolate each potential spot where the defense is playing one by one instead of peeking into them all at once. Tip number 4 comes from a user named Arkis, and this actually builds on the very first tip about counter strafing. And he says, stay mobile. I reached a point where I knew my aim was quite good, but it didn't matter. Against good opponents, I was constantly outgunned. Then it clicked that it wasn't a bad shot. I was an easy target. And again, this goes hand in hand with counter strafing versus crouch shooting. When you're crouch shooting, you become a very easy target because you're standing completely still. Whereas when you're counter strafing, you're always mobile. But this builds on top of that by also saying, hey, let's not repeat the same angle over and over and over, and let's switch up our positioning and continue to peek the enemy from different angles. It is so important to not only have good mechanical movement, but also be unpredictable with it. Tip number 5 comes from the user Humble Scientist, and he says, focus on what you can control. This is a team game. Often you might underperform, but always remember that there is plenty of stuff you can do for the team, like give info, clearing site, or using your abilities to support them. Now, this might be the single best tip on this entire list because as somebody who's a support main, I always feel for my teammates, and it doesn't always lead to the most frags every single game, but that doesn't mean you should start whining and just throwing for your team. Getting kills isn't the most important thing, but being a good teammate and communicating and using your abilities to set up others, especially when you're playing support, is so much more important than your own kills. So if you're not playing your best or your shot's feeling a little bit off, you can still help your team win. I've had games where I'm blatantly bottom fragging and my duelist will be somewhere in the middle of the pack just complaining about everything. And I'm the one that has to glue things together to keep things intact for our team so we don't start malding, which is so backwards considering I'm the one with the least amount of frags in the team. But I know that that's my job sometimes as a support player. Tip number 6 actually comes from the same user, Humble Scientist. And again, he says, use mistakes as opportunities, not as bad experiences. People who lack experience or proper mental training tend to think about mistakes and focus on them during their games. This wrong perspective only leads to choking or a bad gaming experience. Instead, try to think of mistakes as opportunities to grow your potential and achieve more next time. Obviously, based off the past 2 tips, Humble Scientist on Reddit knows what he's talking about. Seriously, these are some really good tips, and we need to learn from our mistakes instead of focusing on them, dwelling on them, and allowing that bad energy to continue throughout an entire match. That will literally never help us. Tip number 7 comes from user Chronic Warden, and he says, play numbers when you have a man advantage, set up crossfires with your allies, peek off of your teammate's contact, and play aggressive when you have a number disadvantage. Now, of course, this was a bunch of tips in one, but all of these go along the lines of how to play off of your teammates. Now, a lot of these terms you maybe haven't heard before, such as setting up a crossfire or peeking off of contact. And if you need me to explain this in further detail, I'm sure I could make a whole guide on how to play off of your teammates. So please, if this is something that could help you, let me know down in the comments below. Tip number 8 comes from Do Glove, and he says, play the game to get better. Don't just play to play. Outside of mechanics, it's just decision making. Watch pro players that main your agent and take note of their util usage, how they play around others, try to mimic their game style, take criticism, and communicate a lot. Now, Do Glove makes a really good point here. I think so many people are willing to try new agents, but when they actually go to play them, they're not really sure of their exact role. And that's why I really like his comment about watching streamers, because it's not just about watching them, it's actually noting how they use their utility and play off of teammates. Tip number 9 comes from the user Juan95, and he says, relax your hand, stretch it a bit before playing, take a deep breath, and play chill. This is some great advice to prepare both your physical and mental before you actually get into games. I think all of us can find ourselves in a very tense scenario from time to time when playing Val, whether it's just gripping our mouse too tight or whatever the case may be. But remembering these things in the back of our head can really keep us calm during our games. Last but not least, we have tip number 10 from Bachman, who says, I've read through a bunch and haven't seen anyone mention map awareness. If you're in a safe place, check the mini map. Understanding where things are heading or originating from gives you an advantage over your opponents. And if you guys watched the How to Reach Immortal video, you know how much I stressed mini map awareness. Because Valorant maps are so large, it's almost impossible to pick up every single thing that goes on throughout the rounds. And it's not always practical to rely on your teammates' communication because, well, not all of your teammates communicate very well. So checking your mini map often when you're in a safe place can allow you to pick up on little things throughout the round that can kind of give a hint as to where that round is actually heading. I hope you guys found this video helpful. I was pleasantly surprised when I was going through this Reddit post by all the positive comments because there were actually some really good tips there. Let me know what tip you guys found the most helpful down in the comments below. And again, make sure you guys are following me on Twitch as I stream every single day. And if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, subscribe and check out one of the very helpful videos on the channel. See you guys next time, and thanks for watching. Peace.